10:12 p.m. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing down the deserted main street of Hudson Bay, Manitoba. The town, once a bustling fur-trading hub, was now a skeletal memory of its former self. Empty storefronts gaped with boarded-up windows, their once proud signage hanging in tattered strips. Faded paint peeled from the clapboard houses, their yards choked with waist-high weeds. An eerie stillness hung over the place, punctuated only by the wind's mournful song. I shouldn't have been there. My GPS had malfunctioned on the outskirts of town, leading me down a labyrinth of forgotten back roads before spitting me out onto this desolate main street. My phone had died ages ago, and my car, a sputtering relic inherited from my grandfather, coughed and sputtered like it was on the verge of giving up the ghost itself. Panic gnawed at the edges of my composure. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Hudson Bay. It was just a detour, a whim to take the scenic route on my road trip from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. Now stranded in this desolate wasteland with night falling fast, I cursed my impulsiveness. Spotting a flickering gaslight above a crooked awning, I steered the car towards it. The sign hanging precariously above proclaimed it to be the Rusty Nail Tavern. It was a long shot, but it was my only option. The tavern door creaked open with a groan under my hesitant push. The interior was shrouded in dimness, the only light emanating from a sputtering oil lamp on the bar. Dust motes danced in the air, illuminated by the weak yellow glow. The smell of stale beer and something metallic and rotten filled my nostrils. A single figure sat hunched over at the bar, his back to me. He was an old man, his wiry frame draped in a tattered coat that seemed to swallow him whole. His head was crowned with a shock of white hair, and a gnarled beard hid the lower half of his face. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing eerily in the near silence. The figure remained motionless. I took a tentative step forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. "Excuse me," I said louder this time. "Do you have a phone I can use?" The figure slowly turned his head. I sucked in a sharp breath. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles etched with deep lines that spoke of a life lived hard. But it wasn't the wrinkles that sent a shiver down my spine. It was his eyes. They were milky white, devoid of pupils, reflecting the oil lamp's dim light like two empty sockets. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he was blind. Then, a flicker of something cold and ancient sparked within those milky depths, sending a jolt of raw, primal fear through me. "You shouldn't be here," the old man rasped, his voice a dreary whisper that scraped against my ears. The metallic smell hit me stronger now, like blood left to rust in the open air. I looked down at my feet, noticing a dark stain spreading across the worn wooden floorboards. It wasn't rust. It was blood. What's that smell?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The old man stretched out a gnarled hand, revealing a single tarnished silver dollar in his palm. He pushed it towards me across the bar. "Leave," was all he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I stared at the silver dollar, then back at the old man. Confusion and fear wrestled within me. The urge to flee warred with a bizarre curiosity about the place and the strange man before me. "Why?" I finally managed, my voice barely above a croak. "What is this place?" A flicker of something almost like amusement crossed the old man's face, sending another shiver down my spine. "This," he rasped, gesturing around the dimly lit tavern, "is Hudson Bay's purgatory, a place where the restless dead walk among the living, forever trapped between worlds." The air grew thick around me, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I backed away from the bar, tripping over one of the stools. "Dead?" I whispered, my voice barely a squeak. "You mean ghosts?" The old man chuckled, a dry, hollow sound that filled the room like a death knell. "No, child," the old man rasped, his voice sending shivers down my spine. "Ghosts are mere wisps of memory. These are something far worse." My mind reeled. Trapped spirits? Not ghosts. The very idea was horrifying. Panic clawed at my throat, threatening to choke me. I had to get out of here, out of this town, before I became another stain on the weathered floorboards. How do I leave? I stammered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. The old man's smile stretched unnaturally wide, revealing a gap-toothed grin that sent another wave of horror washing over me. "Leaving isn't so easy, child," he said, his voice dripping with a dark amusement. "Not unless you appease the ones who walk in the shadows." My breath hitched in my throat. "Appease them?" I echoed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "How?" The old man leaned closer, the smell of blood and decay intensifying. "There is an offering," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, an offering the restless dead crave. He gestured towards the back of the tavern, pointing towards a dark, gaping doorway, hidden behind a dusty tapestry. The air emanating from it felt thick and oppressive, filled with a sense of unspeakable dread. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A part of me wanted to run, the other, morbidly curious, wanted to know. The old man's smile widened into a grotesque leer. "A life force," he hissed, fresh and vibrant, something that can satiate their hunger even for a short while. My blood ran cold. He wanted me to sacrifice someone? The thought was unthinkable. But then another sound reached my ears, a faint scratching noise coming from outside the tavern. Through the dusty window, I saw it. A figure, shrouded in shadow, was approaching the tavern door, its movements jerky and unnatural. Panic surged through me. There was no time to argue. I can't do that," I stammered, backing away from the bar. The scratching sound grew louder, accompanied by a low guttural moan. The figure outside pressed itself against the frosted glass, its silhouette vaguely humanoid but warped and twisted. "You have no choice, child," the old man said, his voice flat and devoid of empathy. "They will find you, one way or another. Unless—" He trailed off, his milky eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. "Unless you offer something else," he continued, his voice a sibilant whisper. "Something they hold dear." My mind raced, something they held dear. What could that possibly be? Then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. My car, the sputtering, unreliable relic that had gotten me here, a vehicle, a means of escape. Could that be enough? The scratching outside turned into a frantic pounding. The figure was throwing itself against the door, desperate to get in. "Take your car," the old man rasped, seemingly reading my thoughts. "Offer it to them. Let them have their fun." Without waiting for another word, I bolted towards the door, the sound of the pounding growing louder with every step. I threw the door open, the frigid night air slapping me in the face. The figure outside was a hulking mass of shadow, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. It turned its head towards me, and I caught a glimpse of eyes burning like embers within its darkness. The stench of decay rolled off it in waves. "No!" a voice screamed behind me. I whirled around to see the old man standing in the doorway, his face contorted in a mask of rage. "You were supposed to be the offering." But I didn't listen. I raced towards my car, its engine sputtering weakly. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the engine coughed to life, a glorious sound that brought tears to my eyes. I slammed the car into reverse, ignoring the guttural screech coming from the figure as it launched itself at me. I backed up as fast as I dared, the tires spitting gravel as I turned the car around. Then, I slammed my foot on the gas, tearing out of Hudson Bay like a bat out of hell. The figure shrieked in rage behind me, its voice a cacophony of tortured screams. I didn't dare look back. I drove all through the night, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The faint glow of dawn appeared on the horizon as I finally stumbled out of the car, my legs trembling. I had no idea where I was, but it didn't matter, as long as I was away from Hudson Bay and its horrors. A small gas station loomed ahead, its neon sign a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. I stumbled towards it, pushing open the door and collapsing onto a stool. The young woman behind the counter gave me a startled look. "Can I help you?" she asked kindly. I shook my head, unable to speak. It took me several minutes to get my voice back. I stammered out a story about car trouble and a long night's drive, leaving out the terrifying details. The woman was kind, offering me a cup of coffee and a place to clean up. As I sat there sipping the hot coffee, a sense of reality slowly returned. The experience in Hudson Bay felt like a waking nightmare, but the cold dread in my gut told me it was all too real. When I finally felt composed, I checked my phone. It had miraculously regained a charge. Using my GPS, I plotted a course back to Thunder Bay, the furthest route possible from Hudson Bay. The drive back was long and monotonous, but it was peaceful. Every passing mile felt like a victory. When I finally pulled into my friend's driveway in Thunder Bay, I felt like a shell-shocked survivor. The strange events in Hudson Bay continued to haunt me. Nightmares plagued my sleep, filled with the shadows and screams of the restless dead. I confided in my friend, a history buff who, after much skepticism, started digging into the history of the town. What he unearthed was chilling. Hudson Bay had a dark past, filled with violence and bloodshed. A bloody fur trade war, a devastating smallpox outbreak, and a forgotten mining disaster all contributed to the town's rapid decline. He found a local legend about a tavern called the Rusty Nail, a place where the restless spirits of those who died violently gathered. My experience seemed to confirm the legend. But there was one thing that didn't make sense. The old man. Why was he protecting the restless dead? I continued to research, and slowly, a horrifying truth began to emerge. The old man in the tavern wasn't a protector. He was the orchestrator. He was the one who had lured people to the town, feeding them to the restless dead to appease them somehow. Years later, I still have nightmares about Hudson Bay. I've never driven anywhere near it again, but the experience left an indelible mark on me. It taught me that some places hold darkness that clings to them like a shroud, and some secrets are best left buried. And sometimes, the line between life and death is blurred, with something far more sinister lurking in the shadows.